Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And my name's Attiba.
And we just finished watching Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we, of course, have completed all of Deep Space Nine. We've also done our season wrap-up. We've also done the episode about the documentary about Deep Space Nine. And now we are going to do a full series wrap-up. And to help us do that, we have our frequent guest, Attiba Royster. Welcome, Attiba.
I am so proud to be here for this momentous occasion.
Nice.
It really is Kim getting through the whole of Deep Space Nine. There wasn't one mug thrown at the TV.
I don't believe that.
There was several rants.
There were several rants. No, I never threw anything, but there were definitely some rants. And when we talk about the data in a little bit, it actually is surprising that I made it out of season one and kept watching, because I did not enjoy season one. And by not enjoy, I mean, there was some really bad stuff that went on in that season. So it's good that we kept going.
Admittedly, I feel like if the season one is bad, that's probably a good portent for the show.
It seems like it. The trouble now is that it's much harder to have a bad season one in streaming because the season is short and there's so much writing on it. It's so expensive. It's a lot different now.
That's true.
And if it's on Netflix and it's good, they definitely cancel it after the first season.
Well, we've moved Prodigy there now. I hope Prodigy gets another couple of seasons. It would be a real bummer if they just show season 2 and then that's the end of it. Such a good show.
Yeah.
Well, we gave Attiba a lot of homework because we have a lot of categories of things to talk about because that's how we roll at Rebinge Deep Space Nine, which Attiba always thought was me, but this is really James.
Yeah.
He needs structure, he needs a plan, and so we have one. So we're going to start by talking about which of our seasons is the favorite. So who wants to go first?
Attiba, over to you.
James, back to you.
Oh.
Okay, my favorite season is season 3.
Oh.
Because there were so many absolutely solid episodes. Even if overall it was very episodic TV, we had some great examples of Star Trek. The Search, Second Skin, The Dyer's Cast, Explorers, Visionary, Past Tense, Civil Defense. Solid episodes. It was the last season before Worf joined the show. So you ended up with a slightly different tone after Michael Dorn joined.
There's definitely a different tone after Worf arrives. It changes the dynamic for a long time. It's almost like when Ezri arrived. We really focused on Ezri for a while, and then we switched back to everybody else. So it was very similar with Worf. It's like, oh, now it's a Klingon show, and it became a Klingon show for a long time.
Okay, I can go. I think my favorite is season 6.
Oh.
I don't know. It just feels like this is the season where everything is kind of clicking into place. There's a lot of banner episodes in this season, like Far Beyond the Stars and then Pale Moonlight. Also, it just feels like the comfort level of all the actors and characters and writers is just like at its high point. There's not really like there's not a terrible episode in this whole season. Like there's nothing unwatchable. Maybe Magnificent Ferengi, I think, is one of the few Ferengi episodes Kim actually liked.
Oh yeah, we had that. I believe both of us had that in our top 10 for the season.
Well, it just worked because it was such a nod to the original Magnificent Seven movie.
I don't know though, now that you're saying there's not a bad episode, that sounds like a challenge. I have to go look at the list.
I said there's not a terrible episode.
Not a terrible episode. Okay.
Waltz is in here. Who Mourns for Morn, you might say, is not great, but I like just like a kind of ensemble sort of DS9, this weird show and this weird cast gets together to do a weird thing episode.
I thought the concept of it was really good. What it did to Morn, he didn't deserve that.
Sorry, never mind. I just remembered, or I just saw that Prophet and Lace is in the season. So aside from that, pretty good.
Well, yeah.
The only episode we actually skipped.
It's the only one we didn't even talk about. We just jumped right over it. Well, also, Time's Orphan. is in that season. And that is pretty bad. And so is statistical probability. So there are some clunkers, but just like every season. Yeah.
But for the most part, like the high points of the season are really high. Now, you might argue the low points are really low.
There were some real swings for the fences here.
Exactly.
And the ones that missed really missed. And the ones that
exactly.
They were hitting the lights with the ones that were good.
Well, that's been my assessment of season 2 of Strange New Worlds, is that they were really swinging for the fences with a musical episode, with a crossover episode with Lower Decks, and that has had the same effect, that the highs are really high in season 2 compared, at least for me, from my perspective, to season 1.
The crossover episode, by the way, is one of my favorite Trek episodes of
it's
all
incredible.
Trek.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, Kim.
Well, when I look at the data of how many thumbs up and thumbs down I had, right? Season 5 was the one that had the most thumbs up for me, but that is not the season I picked. I actually agree with Attiba. I think season 6 is the best season.
Yeah.
Because just like what we've been talking about, I think the highs are maybe a little bit higher than the other seasons because of the episodes we've already mentioned in the Pale Moonlight Waltz. But also Sacrifice of Angels is in that season.
That is good.
And Far Beyond the Stars, Magnificent Frankie, right? Things that we already talked about. There are certainly some real lows, like we just said, Times Orphan and Prophet and Lace. So it was sort of a tough call. Each season has something that I really loved, even season 1, and something that I really hated. So it's like I couldn't just exclude seasons that had bad episodes. But I feel like season 6 is the season that I would watch again if I could skip those clunker episodes and just watch the good ones.
Yeah.
Just goes back to the theory of in the 80s and 90s, seasons were just too long. If you trim this down to 12 episodes, it's super strong.
Oh, yeah. That's an exercise we should do. If you trimmed each season down to 10 or 12 episodes, this would be a very different show.
Yeah.
That is very true. And so would Next Generation, for sure. Well, speaking of the data, so if I look at the thumbs up percentages for each season, season 5 is in the lead for both James and for me. I gave 81% thumbs up in that season, and James gave a whopping 88%.
What did I give in season 3?
85%.
That seems about right. Very close.
Yeah, I mean, your lowest season is 77%. My lowest season is 58%. So, I mean, in general, you like the show more than I do. So if I go in order of most thumbs up to least thumbs up, for me, it was season 5, 4, 2, 3, and then 6, which is strange that that's the season I say I would watch again. Then 7, and then 1, obviously, is the bottom.
Yeah.
And for James, it was 5, 3. So your favorite season was the second one.
Yeah.
7, because you liked Ezri a lot more than most people, I think.
I did. I loved what they did with Ezri at the start. And then they just drove the character off a cliff.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, they sort of gave up. They maybe also thought, well, we spent too much time on this new character. Now we have to go back to the story. So you're 5, 3, 7, 2, 4, 1, and 6. So 6 actually for you is the season that has the least thumbs up, which is quite interesting.
I was expecting a lot from it.
Seasons 1 and 3 had the most thumbs down for me, but if we combine the neutrals and the thumbs down, which is kind of the same thing, there's obviously episodes that we didn't like, then season 1 and season 7 are the worst, which I found surprising, and season 6 is the worst for James.
It had to be good for you to give it a thumbs up by season 7.
Well, yeah, I guess your standards go up, right?
Yeah.
But when you combine the neutrals and the thumbs down, I actually disliked 42% of the episodes in season 1. So
impressive.
I mean, bravo if Deep Space Nine is your favorite Star Trek and you stuck with us through me really not liking season 1.
I think we all understand.
Yeah. And I did jump quite a bit. When we got to season 2, I went from 58% to 73% thumbs up.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was a real increase. All right, now let's go to the tricky part of this episode, which is I asked everybody to come up with their top 5 episodes overall of the 7 seasons, which I have to say was an impossible task. 5 was maybe too few, but at the same time, we didn't want to be talking about this for 3 hours. So I'll give you 5. I said you could combine arcs, and if you've got honorable mentions that you just couldn't leave out, you can name those as well. But since we started with James with the favorite season, James, why don't you go again and tell us what your top 5 episodes are?
Okay, top 5, reverse order, number 5.
I didn't rank them.
Oh.
You went one step farther. Go for it.
Number 5, Visionary. I love the idea of miles and time travel. And for years, I still use the line, I hate temporal mechanics.
Yes, you do.
And I also liked the idea that maybe this wasn't time travel and it was Miles jumping between dimensions.
And you hung on to that for a while afterwards, where you said, this isn't Miles. This isn't the right Miles.
It still isn't Miles. Miles couldn't be there. He died in the past.
Yeah. What season was that?
That was season 3.
All right.
Next one, past tense. What an episode. Everything happens in like one room. It's such a compact episode. And I think any episode that was written 28 years ago about social commentary of the time, where the modern world looks more like that episode than it really should, is definitely something that would make you go,
Past tense was really the classic Trek, that we didn't have a ton of budget. We didn't really need any special effects. It wasn't about that, but it was about a real social issue. And they just did it so well, at that rundown DMV somehow. And that's just absolute classic Trek. Yep.
Yeah. Well, if you look at areas of downtown San Diego, they look like a sanctuary district.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Next one, and this will probably make both of you laugh.
Uh-oh.
Dramatis Personae.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
I love that episode. It's a great sci-fi concept. Plus, this is the story of the split between the prophets and the Paraiths. My name will burn across the stars. And then the last episode, Ducat saying, an entire galaxy aflame. This is the story of where the prophets come from.
I mean, I haven't talked to a lot of people about this show overall, so I don't know if that's anybody else's theory, but you blew my mind with that theory, and I love it. I think it's good headcanon.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Attiba?
So, I don't have a strong opinion on it. Sure, that's fine. If you want to, if that's the split, like I never actually really needed to know where the prophets came from. There are just some questions, like, I don't know, I feel like I don't need the answers to in order to just have a compelling narrative. But but if that's what if that's what lets you sleep at night, that's perfect.
Well, James has this thing where he'll find meaning in something that maybe other people can't find meaning in, like Move Along Home, for example, right? He found a lot of meaning in that episode that most people just don't see. They just see the goofy hopscotch thing that everybody does. But I think this is a good example. Dramatis Personae is something that he loved so much. I remember when we watched him, like, yeah, it was a good episode, but he assigned so much meaning to it that it was fun to see it sort of all come together when we got to season 7.
Yeah.
Well, that is a particular talent. And that's why we like James so much.
It's one of many reasons, yes.
Okay, number 2 on my list, The Visitor.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the greatest TV, not even Trek, TV. And number 1, Rapture. Avery Brooks is amazing in this episode. His reaction to Cassidy's return, his viewing of the interconnectedness of everything. His Parmentar, the sacred vision, where he actually is back at the city of Bahala. One of his just best performances in the whole show. I'll put it up there with Far Beyond the Stars and Pale Moonlight. This is just a fantastic performance. And I think as well, it shows he's a prophet, because he actually goes back in time. He says when he has the vision, he says he's there. So I think we're already getting a hint that Sisko is actually beyond time. But just beautiful episode. Really well done.
All right. Those are great. That crosses over with a couple on my list.
Oh.
Right, Attiba, you want to go next?
Yeah, you crossed over with a couple on my list as well. I believe you mentioned The Visitor. Did you say Pale Moonlight?
No.
No, I did not.
Pale Moonlight. Just because as far as the character of Sisko, I think Sisko's struggles are in microcosm, kind of the struggles of everything that happens in the entire situation with the station.
Right.
I think Pale Moonlight is kind of the greatest illustration. Like if you wanted to explain to somebody what's the principal difference between DS9 and TNG, you'd show them in the Pale Moonlight, because it's in stark contrast to kind of what TNG is about.
Yeah.
So I think it's a defining episode of this series. Far Beyond the Stars, which we mentioned, just being an African American and for Avery Brooks understanding, tying the struggles of African Americans to this series, which he was now the African American lead actor on, was very important and I think very instrumental as far as establishing what this show is beyond just a television series as a work of art. I have Duet on my list.
Oh, yeah.
Because... So the thing that I would say about DS9 that makes it different from a lot of the other Star Trek shows is there's so many gray areas. Nobody's really just, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. There's lots of shades of gray. And with Duet, I think being in the first season and kind of illustrating that, really being the first episode to really bring that point across, that even though there are bad guys, not all the bad guys are bad guys. Not all the good guys are good guys. And there's a lot of complicated issues behind everything that's going to be going on. I have a couple of honorable mentions before I get to my last one.
Yeah.
I think the Jem'Hadar is really strong.
Oh, James hates that episode?
The camping episode.
Yes, I know. But the idea that you could introduce the principal threat of your series going forward through this innocuous nothing episode is kind of like incredible. Like just
the Griswold's camping episode.
Children of Time, just as a fan of these characters and just like seeing what an alternate situation could be for all of them is interesting.
Yeah. That was a fun episode. It had when you watch it a few times, it has a lot of holes in it, but it's still, it's a really good sci-fi episode.
Mm-hmm. I feel bad for the future Odo. Still feel bad for him.
Yeah, but
he was a mess.
But he really nailed that outfit. I mean,
he looked amazing.
What did you call him, Kim? The Fabio?
Yeah, that was the Fabio version of Odo. Yeah, he would have been on the cover of a romance novel.
Actually, so my fiance isn't a huge fan of Star Trek, but like she watches it sometimes. But I was watching an episode and she happened to come in and she's like, wow, I want that jacket. And I think it was something Quark was wearing.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense. He had a lot of happening jackets, yeah.
But the last of my 5 is the 2-parter Improbable Cause Dies Cast.
Yeah.
Because not only does it pick up on the threat of the Dominion and makes them a real, actual threat, a viable threat, but also while expanding the depth of what we understand about the characters of Odo and Garrett. Doing all those things together is kind of an incredible just narrative balancing act that I really think is really, really great.
Yeah, it was hard to leave those 2 off of my list.
Yeah.
I think now we've covered almost everything on my list. I think I have 2 that haven't been named yet. The first one that I wrote down was The Visitor, just like the 2 of you had. It's a beautiful story. It's beautifully acted. And even though it sort of stepped outside of the usual Star Trek, it was still a Star Trek story.
Yeah.
And when I watched this yesterday, the thing that really stood out to me is that Avery Brooks is barely in this episode, but he's amazing in it. It's like he has just a couple of scenes, right? Because he will just appear, in Jake's life over time. And he's just so good. He's so emotional. It's an amazing episode. I also had Duet on my list, and I rewatched that a couple of days ago as well. And it's so good. The acting from the main cast is not quite up to the standard that it hits later. But this episode is right at the end of season 1. I mean, there's one episode after it. But It's the one that really showed me, as I was wondering about this show, it showed me the power of it, right? It showed me the power and how good it could be with that episode and then the last one. To me, they did it so differently than how The Next Generation would have done it, where TNG had that episode, The Drumhead. I mean, it's not the same kind of a story, but it's very similar. It's a similar level of drama. This is the one where they're trying to root out the conspiracies that don't exist. But the difference is that those kind of episodes on TNG were generally a platform for the captain. And in this episode, Sisko is barely in it. This is much more about Kira and much more about the guy who played Maritza than it is about the captain. So again, it was just sort of showing how Deep Space Nine would be different from TNG. So an episode that I had that neither one of you mentioned was Tacking Into the Wind. This is near the end of season 7.
Yeah.
This is the episode where they actually steal the ship that has that weapon on it, the Breen weapon.
Yeah.
And it felt like it brought everything together for me because at this point, Kira is the absolute hero. She's not messing around with anything else. She's just being the hero. She remains tough as nails, but also loyal to the core to Odo. That's something that really comes out here. And there's also this thing that Odo is doing where he's trying to remain stoic and closed off because he's hiding the fact that the disease in him has really progressed.
Yeah.
Those are all things about these characters that were finally sort of coming together at this point because towards the end of that episode, Odo just can't hold it back anymore. And he just goes boom and you see the kind of shape that he's in. And it was really moving.
Great special effects on Odo in that one as well.
And also that episode is when Martog, the greatest Klingon ever, becomes Chancellor. I mean, what's not to love? It's a great, memorable episode.
Well, remember, it's also the one where Worf fulfills his destiny when he becomes Chancellor.
Just for a second, yeah.
Briefly.
I also had Rapture from season 5. I had a real debate here about whether or not I should put Rapture in because there's a lot of choices, but I really love this episode just like James did. It leaned into the religious storyline with Sisko, and it was just such a turning point in the overall story for him and also for Kai Wynn. It sort of changed everything from there, or at least kicked everything off from there. And then my last one that neither one of you mentioned is Once More Unto the Breach, which was season 7. I didn't really like Klingons that much before I watched the show, and it's not Worf that made me a fan of the Klingons. It's Martog, and he does not disappoint in this episode. He's so good. He, too, doesn't have a lot of the dialogues in scene because that's mostly left to Kor and to Worf, but he's so good when he tells that story about how Kor did him wrong when he was younger. But also, he's a mature version of a Klingon because he also was like, okay, I'm just going to put this behind me and I'm just going to deal with this. And he did. And by the end, he had sort of grown a bit. And I like stories like that.
I think what was great about the episode is he wanted to either defeat or humiliate Kor.
Yep.
When Kor was in his prime.
Yeah.
But this was an old guy who's faded.
This was not Kor in his prime.
Yeah. And there's no honor in that revenge.
Yep. It was an episode where they really showed how cool it was with that building of the legend part, because Kor became even more of a legend at the end.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, they showed the cracks of the Empire and how really it's classist. Just like any other society. It's no different. It's no better, no worse. And I just thought that they did that so beautifully. And
they really did.
Yeah, I really loved that one.
That is definitely an honorable mention from me. Well, and Kalikas just brings that character to life.
Yes. My honorable mentions, it was tough for me to not put Sacrifice of Angels in the top 5. I think that was one of the episodes I said, this is one of my favorite episodes of all of Trek when we watched it. Yeah. And it was, and I rewatched it the other day. To me, it's a great episode, it's a great watch, but it's really part of a sort of a 3-episode arc. And I didn't love the rest of the arc. I really loved that episode and the way that sort of wrapped up. And it was a real turning point for Dukat. That's the moment when he went from just being obnoxious to just being unhinged. Right. So a lot of things happened in that episode, and I did like it, but I left it out because I didn't feel like it stands on its own as well as some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Even The Wire was tough to leave out, right? Where we learned about Elam Garak.
Yes.
It was when I was watching The Wire that I thought, why did I say we should just have 5? But no, I left that out. And then one other one I would mention is the season finale of season 4, which was Broken Link.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best season ender of the entire series. There are some sort of goofy parts in the episode, of course, because it's Star Trek and it's Deep Space Nine, and there had to be goofy parts. But we had that memorable moment of the evil founder telling Garak that Cardassia was dead, right? Where she said, he's dead, you're dead, Cardassia's dead. I love that. And then I also loved at the end when Odo was turned into a human. I had no idea that happened. So that was such a shocker to me. So that was tough to leave that one out of the list as well. But yeah, those are my 3 honorable mentions plus my top 5.
Excellent.
All right, now the inevitable. Let's go to the bottom 5.
Oh, the bottom
which
5.
Honestly was also difficult to just come up with 5.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. But let's go to James.
Okay, the bottom 5 worst episodes of the entire series.
Yes.
Profit and Lace, Family Business, Siege of AR 558.
Oh, you hate that.
If Wishes Were Horses.
Oh my God.
And Playing God.
Those are terrible episodes.
Dishonorable mentions. Let He Who Is Without Sin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, that was awful.
The Forsaken.
Mm-hmm.
Worst computer episode in all of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right, because they were going to upload the program and that was going to get rid of the virus. They were going to upload it back to where they got it from. Oh, that was amazing. Yeah.
There's an AI living in their computer somewhere and they forgot about it for the rest of the season. Rest of the show.
Yeah, we never went back to that. Yeah, never came up.
Distant voices, ow, my tennis balls.
Oh, that episode. It was an embarrassment. The makeup was terrible. The acting was terrible.
Yep. And finally, this one's just for Kim, the passenger.
Oh, Vantika. Hailing us? Anything that requires some real acting from Sadiq, I question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a terrible list.
Thank you.
It's a great list of terrible episodes.
Yeah, that's a list to put people off watching the show.
100%.
All right, so I have a couple of Jameses on here. I've got Profit and Lace and Wishes Were Horses. Those are all here.
Yep.
I've got Move Along Home on here.
Oh no, James loves that episode.
Okay, I'm hanging up now.
Oh no, Zoom is over.
It's cute, but it's like, this is clearly not a DS9 episode. This is clearly leftovers. What are we doing? I've got Little Green Man, which is, it's all right, but I don't.
No, Little Green Men was terrible.
Yeah.
And I've got Body Parts.
Oh.
The episode itself isn't terrible, but I hate the whole let's transport the baby into Kira's body thing.
Oh, you hated that. I kind of like that because otherwise they would have had to make her pregnant and change the story or leave her off the show. I think all my years as a child of watching soap operas got me used to crazy stuff going on with pregnant women just because they had to deal with pregnancies in the story or within the actors all the time. So that didn't bother me, but that's interesting.
I don't know. It just leads to some weirdness. Miles giving Kira lots of massages. I don't know how I feel about that.
Oh, no, that was weird. I agree. They handled a lot of that really badly. Yeah, I do agree with that.
That wasn't good. Plus, he'd never leave Neela for Kira.
Oh, my God, Neela.
It's actually really hard because even in maybe not Profit and Lace, but in Move Along Home, there's stuff to like. Mm-hmm. There's stuff to like in every episode.
It was a good sci-fi concept episode.
It is, but I just think it's so over the top and schlocky.
It is over the top. I agree.
It gave us a whole comedy routine in Lower Deck.
Yeah. That hopscotch scene lives in infamy.
Apparently.
That was all yours, Attiba?
That's all I got.
Any dishonorable mentions?
No more dishonorable mentions.
Okay, Cam.
Well, I have a lot that you guys didn't mention. So
Here we go.
And I have one that's just a category, which you could probably guess. But the first one that I'm going to mention is The Quickening. I can't tell you how much I hated that episode. This was the one where the Dominion was causing genocide on a planet.
Yeah, for generations.
Right? That episode was not Star Trek. I hated it so much. And at the end, it was so depressing and so awful. And when they left that planet, there was no hope. It came right out of Julian's mouth. It's like, yes, the next generation wasn't going to have the disease or whatever the final conclusion was.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because what Julian and the woman talked about was, well, everybody's going to die anyway. It was so depressing. I couldn't stand that episode.
Wow.
My second one is just the Ferengi mistake. It's a category. It's a bunch of episodes. We already mentioned Family Business, Ferengi Love Songs, Profit and Lace, Little Green Men. These are terrible episodes. It's all really a turnoff for me, everything Ferengi.
Magnificent Ferengi worked, though.
Yeah, but were we in season 7 by then? Or maybe 6? We were in season 6 by then. So I had to endure 5 seasons of just horrible episodes. So yeah, the Ferengi mistakes, that's my second one.
Yeah.
Q-less, which is an episode from season 1, an absolute embarrassment of an episode.
I almost had that. Except, can I really say that a Q episode is terrible? I mean, yes, this one's terrible.
Yes, you can.
This is like, oh, Next Gen fans, here you go. And then...
Oh, that's right.
Yes, he was, yeah. I hate that episode. Was awful. And then another one you guys didn't mention was Defiant. That was the Thomas Riker episode.
Oh,
absolutely ridiculous. I think the idea was solid. of what they wanted to do, but the execution was so terrible. It's like they added insult to injury at the end with the stupid Riker and Kira kiss.
Oh, that's right.
I was so mad. I thought my eyes were going to roll out of my head.
Did they perform the Riker maneuver in that one?
He didn't, but he did the greatest thing I think I've ever seen.
When he pulls off his sideburns?
When he pulls off his sideburns
so
to reveal
stupid.
his evil goatee.
Oh.
Just incredible work.
Oh, that episode
See, but
was terrible.
Frakes is hamming it up. You gotta love it.
James and I have talked about this before, but when I watched TNG, Riker was not my favorite character, maybe one of my least favorite characters, because he played it as just such a bro, which is just a version of a guy that I don't want to watch on television. I'm not sure I want to interact with too much. It just didn't work for me.
I can confirm this. My introduction to TNG, and I've said this before, is Kim rented the VHS tapes and we watched like the best episodes of TNG. And in all of those ones, I can't count how many times Kim would say...
No Riker episodes.
Yeah. Riker's being annoying.
I didn't like him, but I love him now. I love old Riker.
Oh.
The way he plays it is so completely different. Now he's the exact kind of guy that I do like, right? He's funny, but he can also be serious. And of course, he's turned into this great director, which he wasn't at that time as well. But he's such an important part of Star Trek now. And I love him, but I did not love him in the early days.
Was it First Contact when your opinion of him flipped?
It could be. Yeah, it could have even been later in TNG. I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
It's been too long.
Not to turn this into a TNG podcast, but I mean, Best of Both Worlds is basically a Riker episode.
Yeah, and he's amazing in it. There's no doubt about it. My dishonorable mentions we already talked about, Distant Voices and Playing God. You said Playing God, right, James?
He did.
Yeah, okay. Comically bad is what my note says. All right, now for my own special category.
Oh, your special category, yes.
Episodes that should have been musicals. Now, I picked one episode per season, but that's because I could have almost every episode be a musical. So I'll let James go first. What did you pick any, James?
Yes, I did. Of course, this would totally work as a musical. Dramatis Personae.
Oh, 100%. It's practically a musical the way it is.
Yeah. Second season, Tribunal.
Wow.
Great court scenes.
Okay.
Season 3, Second Skin.
Second Skin would have been good. That's my third season pick as well.
Season 4, For the Cause, because that's got Eddington Snodgrass, as you kept on calling him.
Yep.
Snodgrass, yeah.
Season 5, For the Uniform.
Oh, so a two-parter.
Well, yeah, that's what started this whole conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Season 6, of course, it has to be You're Cordially Invited. I mean, that's virtually a musical in its own right.
It's certainly operatic.
Yes. And then season 7, Covenant.
Oh, interesting. I love that episode. It's so funny. All right, Attiba, what do you have?
I did not do these by season, but I will try to do it now.
That's fine.
Season 1, The Storyteller.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Interesting.
Kind of a clunky one. You could, I think you would improve that one with music.
That could work, yeah. That would actually improve it.
Season 2, I do like Tribunal. Tribunal as a musical sounds pretty great. Actually.
Yeah. I'm picturing that bit at the end where he says, I won. They'll kill me. That could be like a whole musical thing.
That could be good.
3, Facets, maybe?
Oh.
That could work.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
That was the one with all the different lives of Dax. Okay. Yeah. That actually would have helped that episode because some of those conversations were so dumb, they would have made better songs.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what Avery was doing. So,
Remember? Oh, yeah. Didn't he had an accent. Well, they all kind of had a funny accent when they started doing it. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
He was he was auditioning for Silence of the Lambs and that. I don't know.
He was, yeah.
Sword of Kahless. Let's do that.
That's my pick for season 4 as well. I think that would have been pretty good.
That's a good one.
Looking for Parmach in all the wrong places, which is basically a freaking musical anyway.
Couldn't have made it worse.
Oh.
His Way.
There's a lot of singing already in that one, so that could have worked, yep.
And finally, in season 7, this is tough, but it would have to be Bada Bing, Bada Boom. Bada Bing, Bada Bang would have to be.
Oh, that would have been a pretty good one, I would think.
Yeah.
Well, I put season 1, I put The Wire. I think that could have been a very dramatic musical. I always go for the drama with the musicals. I think that would have been good.
Yep.
Season 2, I thought Necessary Evil could have been good. That sort of film noir, really moody episode. And also this was establishing where Odo and Kira met. So there could have been something going on there in a song.
Yep.
I had Second Skin, season 3, sort of Kayla, season 4. I did have a backup for season 4 that maybe a musical could have saved Little Green Men. I think that could have improved it.
Interesting. Sort of Kalis, though. That's a solid choice.
Season 5, I put The Darkness and the Light, sort of in the vein of the Phantom of the Opera, right? Because we had that guy with the burned face, and he was hiding in the shadows all the time.
Yeah.
And then season 6, I said The Sound of Her Voice, because the individuals talking to the voice would have been great solos, because those were all meaningful conversations that they were having. So those would have been great songs.
That's a good episode, too.
Also could have done Waltz. That would have been very dramatic because Ducat Unhinged could have been a great musical.
True.
Well, he's not unhinged. They're just the power rates are talking to him.
Well, he seemed unhinged. And then I put maybe music could have saved the Siege of AR-558 in the last season. Because James and I really did not like that episode.
No, I don't think that one's savable.
Move Along Home would have been quite a goofy musical episode.
I think so.
All right, now we just have a bunch of sort of rapid fire topics here. And the first one is threads we wished had been wrapped up. I put as the example Jake and Cisco at the end. I thought that was a real failure.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the whole reason for the categories. I just wanted to complain about that one more time.
I'm with you.
But is there anything else that you guys have that you wish they'd wrapped up?
I wanted to find out what happened to Neela and Pell.
Well, Neela went to jail. But it would have been nice to hear what happened to Pell. Like, did she go to the Gamma Quadrant and have some big success?
Right. And how does she react to the changes and the reformations made within Ferengi society?
Yeah, like, is she able to come back? Yeah. I agree that would have been a good callback, yeah.
I feel like we kind of get left. Like, what happens to Bajor and the whole Bajoran system now that there's no Cardassian? Does it become the dominant political entity in the system? Like, how does that change? Like, I guess I want to know, like, what happens after there's no Cardassians anymore and
no Kai Wynn either.
Kai Wynn.
So they're left with no Kai, no major enemy, and their emissary's gone.
Right, but you've seen the documentary where they have the potential 8th season outline.
Yeah. We reject that.
It's some interesting stuff, like especially how DS9 is actually turned into a shrine of the emissary or something like that. But
my pitch for DS9 The Next Generation is way better.
I told James not to get so wrapped up in that because that was like one day brainstorming and hopefully the ideas would have gotten better. But some of the ideas in that were good. I reject that Kira would have become a Vedic. I thought that was dumb.
Yeah.
Kira's not becoming a Vedic.
Yeah.
Picard answered my what the heck happens to Worf question, so...
That's true.
Well, and Picard also, at least the books that were before the season started, answered whether or not Bajor got into the Federation, because they do in Picard. Yeah. But we don't get much detail. All right, how about gripes/complaints that we never got over from the early seasons? And of course, the example is Julian is a creep. I thought he was a creep in season 1, and we complained about him being a creep in season 7.
Well, I think what happened to me is rewatching it this time. I think at the end, I really felt that Julian was manipulative almost to a point of being predatory. It felt more disturbing. Plus, when he was dating his patient, what's her name?
Oh, Serena. Yeah, that was bad.
Julian is not a very good individual.
Yeah. I never got over the actress who played Jennifer. She was the absolute worst every time she appeared. I don't even know what her name is. She was in the documentary, too, for just like one line that she had about Avery Brooks.
She was good in the first episode.
I did not think she was good. Every time she appeared, I was like, oh, God.
She's just lying under the rubble.
Yeah. No, she's in the episode.
She is?
Oh, yeah.
She's in the episode more because she appears like walking on the beach. They replay when Cisco met her. Hey, I am the Deep Space Nine expert now.
Wow.
I'll tell you what I never got over.
Go.
Yeah.
Bajoran uniform designs.
Oh, man, the brown one's the worst.
I do not like... Listen, whenever I see Kira in a Federation uniform, I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. This is
She
so
looks
good. Why can't we
amazing.
just have this? Starfleet uniform, rather.
Agreed.
They can't decide whether they want low collars or high collars or no collars. Like, just figure it out, guys.
Does she have heels? Does she not have heels? Does she have a belt? Does she
a
not have a
skirt
belt?
thing? Like, what's happening?
It's all over the place.
She also makes
Yeah.
a very cute Cardassian.
I don't know about that.
It's too creepy. The Bajoran dress uniform was great.
That
She had
is
that
true.
purple dress uniform, but
Oh,
otherwise I
yeah, you
agree.
love that.
In particular, the brown security ones were just god-awful ugly.
At some point, I think we need to rank the races of the Alpha and Delta Quadrant by uniform.
Oh, I was going to say,
Yeah.
Attiba, you want us to rank the races? What are you saying? Okay, the uniforms.
I'm
Okay.
I'm telling you right now. The uniforms. I'm telling you right now, Romulans and Bajorans are at the bottom.
At least the
Terrible.
Romulan uniforms went from the full crazy shoulders. By the end, they actually had fairly decent uniforms.
That's the only race that I could say their original series uniforms are better than their next generation.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, their uniforms are definitely terrible. They get really good in Picard. All the
Yeah.
clothes in Picard are next
I
level.
will say
Yeah.
one thing as a minor gripe about the show. I feel they started abandoning the concept of lots of different races on the station. You gave the reasoning, Kim, it's probably because they were spending so much time on the makeup of Klingons and Cardassians, who became regulars. But I loved the earlier seasons, certainly in season 1, where we were seeing lots of wacky-looking different species and alien races. I liked that look and feel that this really was a gateway. So you were having lots and lots of people coming through that station. And I felt they got away from that. It was just something I liked.
Right.
I have something that's not quite a gripe, but I don't really see any place else on the sheet to really discuss this. But I always thought that I know that the inclusion of Worf was because ratings were down and they needed to get more next-gen connections.
Yeah.
But do you think adding that character helped or hindered kind of what DS9 was trying to do? I feel like initially it was kind of a stunt. It's like,
Right.
okay, you guys are going to be watching Voyager soon enough, and a character is introduced in that series, and then the series dramatically changes to revolve around that character.
Mhm.
That didn't happen to such an extent with Worf, but I do feel like all of a sudden there's a much larger emphasis on Klingons and Klingon stuff.
Yeah. It became a Klingon show. Yeah.
And I don't know if that helped. I don't know if that was to the detriment of the show or... But it's just always something when I think about the show that I kind of think about, like, well, what would have happened if there was no Worf? Like, would that have given other characters more room to develop?
Yeah. I don't think it hurt the show, mostly because I liked Worf by that point. I think it took him a while to find what quite to do with Worf. I think it was, you get it, you hit the nail on the head. It was a gimmick to start with. And then we started really bringing the Klingons in and fleshing them out.
I think really the character that got derailed the most by Worf joining the cast is Dax. Like, Dax
Turned into the girlfriend.
yeah, she just became kind of... I think she was much more interesting before she kind of became...
She was quirkier, and, we talked quite a bit about that. She had a sort of quirky sense of humor, and she would just say things that were wildly inappropriate, right? And that really sort of changed when she got connected with Worf and just became the girlfriend. That was the thing, that room full of white guys who wrote the show, they just didn't always know what to do with these women characters that they had. And I think that's a good example of it.
I think maybe the other side of it is Julian got completely derailed.
By Worf?
Yeah. You look at, they were heading in a direction with Julian, and then you said it felt like Julian went backwards in later episodes.
Well, I don't know. My opinion on this is sort of confusing because I really felt like this show sort of ruined Worf for me because I found him to be really whiny. We talked about this before. But at the same time, the introduction of Worf brought me Martog, who was my favorite Klingon character. And I think at this point, this was season 3, right, that we introduced Worf?
4.
Oh, it was 4, so we had 3 seasons. I mean, all of the Star Trek shows, when you watch them, they struggle a bit in the beginning trying to establish the characters and make them interesting. And what makes them, to me anyway, the most interesting is the relationships between them. And the relationships between them finally started to improve at the beginning of season 3. They started to get a little bit better. But by the end of the show, apart from maybe Ezri, everybody was pretty well developed.
Yeah.
Was Worf in season 4, was that sort of the turning point? Because now they had to be a little bit less flabby with their character stuff and they had to be more focused. Or was that a coincidence? I don't know. So I feel a little bit wishy-washy on the topic. It may have changed what the showrunner was planning to do with the show, or at the same time, it just may have helped him become more focused. So I don't know. It's a good question, but I don't know what my opinion is.
I would have liked to have seen more Worf and Miles. I would think that interaction, we could have seen more of that.
I thought Worf and Kira were kindred spirits.
It would seem so.
But they didn't talk much.
They didn't. Should we just segue this into the next question, which is lost opportunities?
Show failures or lost opportunities? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had the Worf being sort of wrecked for me as a failure. What else do you have to say there?
Just that, like a lot of relationships where characters seemed like they should be kindred spirits just never really got a chance to hang out, like Worf and Kira, or like, the Worf and Ezri thing is a weird...
It wasn't well implemented.
It wasn't. Like, they're both people that kind of come into this family from outside and have to kind of make their way in, but like,
right.
It's just immediately like, again, back to being the girlfriend. But it is an interesting sort of, what does a person who had lived this one life now interacts with their old life as a new person?
The Ezri started so strong, and I love this idea of Ezri having all this background from the Symbiont without really necessarily having the training. She just had a pamphlet. They built this character up and we had some great episodes. And then I guess because they wanted to rush to get the series done, we missed that further expansion.
Yeah, if there'd been another season, you might have gotten more.
I don't necessarily know that we needed to bring Dax back as a full-time cast member. Just sitting here thinking about it, I think it may have been much more poignant to have Dax be killed, and then some point in season 7, just the new Dax symbiont comes aboard the station for an episode or two, and then like they go back off.
Causes a little chaos, and then they leave. Yeah.
Oh,
Because like what they did with Worf and Ezri was so stupid in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It ended it in a good place, but that's a good point.
I think you may have the lion's share of opinions on this particular topic, Kim.
Oh, I only had a couple of things. I mean, obviously, I thought the Ferengi were such a failure. They went for this broad comedy, and it was just stupid and insulting, and I never got it.
Well, I think your point of if they were aiming to mock hypercapitalism, trying to make it funny didn't work.
The only thing that made me look at it a little differently was in the documentary when I think it was Ira Bear who said the Ferengi were 20th century humans. And when I thought about it that way, I was like, oh, yeah, they kind of are. Okay, that, they're so ridiculous that sort of made a little bit of sense. But overall, I didn't enjoy the Ferengi stuff. Yes, there was one good episode, but, that was mixed in with a lot of terrible ones.
Do you think... All right, a lot of the Ferengi stuff comes from the first season of Next Gen. A lot of the Ferengi backstory stuff that they would eventually have to develop comes from TNG. Do you think if they had invented a new race to do all that kind of, maybe not a race, but a different character to do all that scurrilous kind of shady, underhanded business, it would have worked better for you? Because I think the people that like Quark like that aspect of his personality, not so much that he's played for laughs or the Ferengi-ness, but like this kind of like charming swindler thing.
I don't mind the charming swindler. What I didn't like was playing for laughs, the fact that they're females, right, were not allowed to wear clothes. They were not allowed to own property. They were not allowed to do anything, and that was somehow funny. That, I didn't think they handled that particularly well. The other parts of Quark I could handle. If he was just sort of a scoundrel, that would have been fine. And even that sort of sexist part of him where he was sexually harassing his employees all the time, even that would have been okay as part of the story if they weren't also saying it was funny.
Got it. I see. Yeah.
Because that stuff is real. It's just not funny.
It is real. And that's like, that's a product of late 90s writing. Late 90s all male writing rooms, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. The last thing I have on this list is that we kind of joked about this earlier. There were a lot of things that we introduced and then dropped and we never brought back up. And it's like, you can't have both. You can't be both episodic and not episodic.
The AI living in the computer.
The AI living in the computer in the doghouse is one thing, but the Ketracel White, that was a big one for me. We had this whole thing about the Ketracel White, and by season 7, we didn't even talk about it.
And don't forget, the reason why they had Ketracel White was when Weyoun said how they needed it to keep the Jem'Hadar loyal.
To control the Jem'Hadar, yeah. And we don't even know. So what happens now from here? I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are really my only complaints. And then we also have show successes. So what do we think are the successes of Deep Space Nine?
The fantastic fleshing out of the Klingons.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Worf started it because we look back at TNG and most of them seem to be about the internal struggles within the Empire. And then with this one, we get like these fully fleshed out Klingons. And when we bring Martog in, we get just this great view of Klingon society, the melodrama that makes up the Klingons dealing with each other. But at the same time, the family backgrounds of Klingons, it works so well here compared to their sort of introduction. They go from being like a cardboard cutout of a villain to an actual full race. And not to give a spoiler, but I find it fascinating because I look at it like how Tim Russ, when he played Tuvok, turned Vulcans from, just Spock. And then he makes Tuvok into this fleshed out character where you're like, oh, this is what Vulcans are like. And the same thing happened here with Martog.
Right.
More than Michael Dorn, even. Dorn plays a very reserved Klingon.
Exactly.
Who almost is stuck between two worlds. Martog plays a pure Klingon who actually embraces honor, whereas so many of the other Klingons, it's optional. They won't be honorable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought one of its real successes was the great development of side characters, like Damar and Kai Wynn, such interesting characters. We didn't do a lot of that on TNG with the side characters. I mean, we had some crappy side characters. Like Barclay. I know people love Barclay. I did not like Barclay.
Can't believe you don't like Howling Mad Murdoch.
So that's one of the benefits of actually sticking the story in a single static location, that you get more time to flesh out these other ancillary characters.
Right.
Whereas in TNG, they're flying off from planet to planet every week.
Right.
Well, in the development of the villains, Salome Jens as the female founder, she is just nasty.
Right. We had more than just Q who kept coming back.
Right.
Yeah, we had all these other nasties. Yeah. Did you have anything else in this category, Attiba?
So what I think this show is incredibly successful at is showing a kind of flip side to the view of the Federation presented in Next Generation.
Yeah.
Very true.
Picard kind of appears to us as perfect, flawless, exemplary Federation citizen, exemplary human. And even though it's alluded to that he hasn't always been that way, like that's the way he's presented on the show. DS9 shows that with Sisko, it shows in greater depth the struggle to maintain those ideals in a world where those ideals are super hard to maintain. That's what I think this show does that's super successful. Because, again, it's easy to fly into a situation and say, hey, this needs to be done this way and it'll be better for everybody and it'll be great. And then fly away rather than to say, okay, so I've got all this stuff going on and I've somehow got to make all this stuff work and uphold my ideals and not like go crazy in the process. So I think that is what the show really succeeds at.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's definitely different, I guess, from what we came from with TNG. Yeah.
You know, it makes me think of a comment you made a long time ago, Attiba, about living in paradise. They're all living in paradise, and it's pretty easy to be these exemplary Federation citizens when everything's great. And Sisko is stuck on the edge of nowhere with a starving planet that's just survived an occupation with all these rival interests.
It's just such a different show because TNG started with the heavy influence of Gene Roddenberry and still trying to keep people in paradise, right? And still trying to have this really positive view of things. And Roddenberry, he died, I think, in season 2 of TNG.
Yeah, they were already pushing him out.
They were, well, of course, but he was still there. He still had that sort of vision, and that show was impacted by that vision. And then by the time DS9 rolled around, well, they were a little bit more in the Wild West, and they even called it the Wild West in the first episode.
Yeah.
So they were freer to explore things that were a little bit darker. I feel like if you looked deeply into the episodes, and it's been such a long time since I watched TNG, that there's probably a very similar number of dark episodes, but the themes and the growth of the characters is quite different. Everybody's sort of fully formed at the beginning of TNG, right? And I think that's, again, because that was that bright and happy vision of everything. But we come to DS9 with a lot of growth needing to happen to all the characters. I mean, Sisko was in a very dark place. He wasn't yet a captain.
Yeah.
Kira was in a very dark place. She was suffering PTSD, essentially, and she needed to get herself out of that.
12 months before, she was in a swamp fighting Cardassians.
That's right. Bashir was just kind of a moron, and, he needed a lot of growth as well. And maybe the only person who was pretty much the same from beginning to end was Miles. He was pretty much the exact same character from the very beginning of the show. But
well, actually, Miles starts as a happy-go-lucky engineer and ends as a traumatic, just PTSD.
How many times can you torture Miles in one show?
Oh my God. But if you look to it, even Ram and Nog, look at where they are in season 1 and where they are in season 7. So they had more opportunities to grow and change the characters than the Next Generation did. So yeah, it's going to generate a different show. If everybody's perfect at the beginning, it's hard.
Yeah, again, and I don't mean to say the characters in TNG are perfect. They're just presented as perfect. They're like the ideal of...
Totally, yeah. And it really wasn't until later that they started to pick those things apart, because they realized you can't make a show like that.
Well, there's also a difference, I think, in the Enterprise is the flagship. It's supposed to be displaying the best qualities of Starfleet and the Federation, whereas DS9 is
strip mall.
The epitome of... the strip mall. It's the epitome of the frontier town on the edge of civilized space. So everyone is going to behave differently.
Any other successes?
I think it was pretty amazing that they were able to bring religion into a show and make it work. I think that it's something that would be almost impossible to do with a show that's not a science fiction show, because of just the many different religions that there are on Earth, right? And I think it's just tough to pull that into a show and make it something that everybody wants to watch. And then they did this thing where everybody on Bajor is the same religion, although we find out later there were some cracks in that with the cult of the Power Wraiths.
Well, and let's not forget the Church of Akorum.
And the Church of Akorum, right, that we are pretty sure popped up. So I thought it was pretty good that they were able to make that work.
Well, it also appealed to the atheist side of the Federation looking at it. Well, Dax looked at it from a scientific approach. They were aliens who lived within the wormhole who had complete control of time.
Well, but they respected it in each other, which is something we talked about somewhere along the way, that's like a good, respectful workplace, that you can still work with people who have different religions and different beliefs from you. And that's something that, I have to deal with all the time. And I thought they portrayed that really well. But just anytime you touch on religion in fiction, people just lose their minds about it. It's like, oh my God, you're blasphemous. It's whatever. Well, this isn't blasphemous because this is something made up out in the future on a different planet.
It's also one of the ways Worf really embraces it as well, where Worf has his strong convictions of Sto-vo-kor and Kahless, and he just rolls when Kira is talking about her faith.
The next category is kind of weird, and in the end, I couldn't even come up with anything, so maybe a strange category, but I put down episodes which should have sequels or prequels in modern Trek. Did you guys come up with anything for this one?
Well, Discovery Season 1 is kind of a sequel to all the Mirror episodes.
True.
Oh, Discovery really manages to embrace what the Mirror universe is.
Yeah, and improve it. The only thing that I put down was we should bring back Jadzia, and that we should figure out what happened to Sisko's baby. Those things he must be somewhere.
Well, this is why we need Deep Space Nine, The Next Generation. It's time to bring it back.
Not before we have Grandpa Joe's Creole cookout, but...
Nice. Okay. 2 categories left. Lasting impressions of the show.
I still use lines from the show in my regular life.
That's true, you do.
When I think about some of the most dramatic moments of Trek, I would say like 60 to 70% of them come from this show rather than the other shows and movies.
Mm.
Oh.
Also, you can't discount the importance of having a character of color as the lead. Like, that's just always going to be something that makes it something to aspire to, something to like think about and be able to see yourself in. And that's very important.
Sure.
I think the lasting impression of the show for me, I think I would have to go with, there are episodes in here which I can still remember pretty much the entire episode without having to rewatch it.
Yeah, because it had such a big impact on you.
Yeah, because those episodes really appealed to me. I mean, like Duet, Rapture, The Visitor. These are great episodes that just hit a nerve with me.
The Visitor. You just can't forget it. Yeah, you can't shake it once you've watched it.
Right. I know you don't like The Quickening, but The Quickening to me...
I'd like to shake that one.
Yeah. That episode to me is one of those ones of, it's just the absolute raw brutality of the people who would do that. And sort of almost the alienness of the founders, that you would do that and be fine with it. I mean, not even a genocide. It's like you want to make these people suffer forever.
Yeah. Memorable.
So it crosses the gamut of shows of just really positive things in this show and then really negative things. And, you know, they hit me in a particular way and I still love those episodes today.
I was just thinking, but sort of, so Pluto TV, which is like an ad-based streaming service, has two all Star Trek channels, and neither of them show DS9 episodes, which is just my gripe that I'd like to put out here. But it is weird. A good measurement of what I like. Like, okay, I'm saying this in a roundabout way. There are Voyager and TNG episodes. There are very few episodes of either of those series where I say, oh, we're at this I'm just going to sit down and watch the rest of this episode. I think DS9 has a lion's share of those episodes. Like, if I see a snippet of it, if I see a whiff of Duet, I'm watching all of it. Like, there's no way. If I see a whiff of Way of the Warrior, I'm watching it. Improbable Cause Dies Cast, I'm watching both episodes. Like, I'm in now. I think as far as rewatchability, DS9 is probably the best series for me.
There are plenty of TNG episodes like that for me. Like, if I get a whiff of Data's Day, I will absolutely sit there and watch the rest of it. There's a lot of Data episodes like that for me, like Measure of a Man and things like that. I would definitely sit down and watch.
I think the problem with me and TNG is I've seen so much of it. It's like a great album that you've listened to 4 million times.
You're all full. You're all full, yeah. Well, I think my lasting impressions are two things. One, I'll never forget the Klingon wedding ceremony. That was such a jolt to my system. I just didn't see it coming.
Wow.
And just the second thing is just that the show really made me like Klingons. I absolutely did not like them before, and it really made me like them because of Martog.
Yeah. I get that because my Vulcan is Tim Russ.
Yeah. It's very similar. And my Spock is Hot Spock. Just to be clear. Spock was never my favorite character until Discovery. And now, oh my gosh.
Hot Spock agrees with me.
That's what I was thinking too. The last category here is Deep Space Nine's impact on modern Trek. And I put this on here only because it's so ridiculous to me when people complain about Discovery when Discovery is such a love letter to Deep Space Nine. It's almost like a joke that Deep Space Nine, like you were saying, there's Star Trek channels and it doesn't include Deep Space Nine. It's so funny to me that people look back on it like Deep Space Nine is a lesser Trek somehow, when in fact all of modern Trek is coming from Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Because the people who are making Trek now, they were Deep Space Nine fans. If you listen to them on podcasts, right, that's what they talk about. That's the show that they talk about. So it definitely had an impact on the future of Trek without knowing it at the time, but it certainly had that impact.
Lower Decks loves Deep Space Nine, or the references to it.
Yeah. To Miles right away in the first episode, I think.
Yeah, the greatest Starfleet engineer of all time. Yeah. And the statue of him in the future.
Just the willingness of the new series to deal with darker, quote unquote, darker topics and issues and go to some places that other Trek shows maybe wouldn't have gone to.
Yeah.
Discovery is both. I mean, look, the last season of Discovery was not good, but the first 3 seasons, it's both the idealistic Trek and the darker DS9 version of Trek. It managed to sort of marry both of those things together.
Yeah.
There was also something, Attiba, in the documentary where Cole Meany, they were all reading letters that people wrote in complaining about the show. And Cole Meany reads one about, we don't want to watch a show of people walking around talking about their feelings, which is one of the things people complained about with season 1 of Discovery, right? It's like, oh, all we talk about are the feelings. It's like, yeah, it was the same complaint on that show 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, we're just going to have to wait until Rebinge Discovery to get my takes on that.
Yes, I know.
We got to wait 23 years?
Oh my God, that is a long wait. So, as usual, we did get some audio feedback from Jeff X Force 11 about the entire series. So, let's have a listen.
Well, hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X Force 11 leaving my feedback about Deep Space Nine, the series. And if you can't tell, the emotion in my voice is real. I just finished the series finale. Now, I never watched this series other than maybe an episode or so here or there, but never watched it when it originally came out. But I have to give it up. This series was different. It stepped out of the Starship Exploring the Galaxy mold and was one based out of a space station and branching out into the galaxy. And along the way, they made it possible for us to explore a great deal of it. But it was different in a lot of other ways as well. I think one of the biggest parts of it was relationship between the crew, but also relationships as they depend on faith. This series was not afraid to look at faith, and I applaud it because much of the Star Trek universe steers clear of faith and does not address aspects of faith. There is talk about faith as far as different religions with the different planets, but never to the degree that we saw here. And I applaud that. And I would applaud more of a look into that to dwell on faith. I know Voyager looked at Chakotay's Native American heritage, but I don't think we got deep dives into the other world religions of Earth like we did here with the religions and faith systems of the galaxy. And I really applaud them for that. That was a bold step to say, we're going to talk about faith. We're going to talk about how science and faith work out together and how they can be at odds with each other. We talked about the idea of messiahs and prophets and religious leaders on a regular basis. It was bold, and I think it landed well for the most part for me. I know that there are issues with the series, as y'all have brought up, with leadership and with the treatment of women and other things. And I appreciate your podcast bringing those up and looking at it with a modern lens, but yet realizing that this is a product of its time, even though it's supposed to be addressing things in the future. But I thought this was a bold move, and it will be interesting to look at Voyager in light of this series as how, they go hand in hand. But that's the thing I appreciate about Star Trek is that it's expanded to go beyond just one crew and one ship and even one genre. Now with New Trek, we've got different genres of everything. We've got the comedy of Lower Decks. We've got the grittiness and the far future of Discovery. We've got a look into the past that we didn't have before with Strange New Worlds. We have some of the best Trek that I think I've seen being Prodigy. And I am grateful for the role that Deep Space Nine played in making a spot for a larger universe within the Trek universe. And I want to thank you two, James and Kim, for taking us on this journey, for letting us be a part, and for getting first-timers through like you did with me. Well, until we journey again with Voyager, this is X-Force 11 signing out.
Wow, that was a really well thought out commentary. You know, it makes a great point there of the way Deep Space Nine really did deal with faith. And also, not just faith, but the interaction of a religious hierarchy and their version of the Bajoran structural church, as it were, and actual true believers like Kira, and the disconnect that could happen between the institution and the actual believers. And Kai Wynn is an amazing archetype of that difference.
So interesting, too, with Kai Wynn, as it shows the hypocrisy of religious leaders, because we know that there are leaders like that. But then at the same time, it shows the incredible faith that Kira was willing to have. And some of the earlier Kais, right? Kai Opaka, Naomi Osaka. Yep. She was a true faithful leader.
Yes.
I completely agree that this is something that sets Deep Space Nine apart from the others. They all have something that makes it different. And their willingness to explore religion is unique within the universe. Whenever people complain to me about not liking something in a new Star Trek series or on an individual Star Trek series, I should say, this to me is the beauty of Star Trek now. It is so vast that each series, it's okay that each series sort of scratches a different itch. Each one doesn't have to be for you, and each one isn't for me. But there are things in each of them that are unique and different. If they were all exactly the same, it would be boring. I still remember the argument I had with someone on one of the podcasts a long time ago, one of Brian's podcasts on the Talk Through Media Network, where they were saying that, before Lower Decks came out, and they were like, it's going to cheapen Star Trek. Baloney.
No.
It's gonna broaden its horizons. It's gonna open it up to new people to watch it. It gives it more texture, more interest, not less.
Yeah.
So I agree with what Jeff is saying.
I like his description there of Discovery as gritty. You know, I don't think I would have applied that to Discovery.
I don't see it as gritty. I do see it as dark. It has grittier stories, but it's not a gritty show. It's a very glossy, very shiny show to me. But I agree that the stories are a bit grittier. I do agree with that.
Thinking about it, it does have that grittier edge, even if it is beautifully portrayed.
Well, Jeff made me a little bit emotional there. I could hear the emotion in his voice. It made me feel that way too. And I'm really happy that Jeff came on this journey with us. And it's sad that it's ended, but now we will move on to the next thing. And I'm glad that Jeff is going to join us.
Well, thank you, Jeff. That was much appreciated.
Okay, that wraps up all of our categories, unless anybody else has something to add. I get blank stares, so I'm going to go with no. So,
I think we might have talked the entire series to death now.
This is it.
I think we probably have. Well, there's one more episode of this podcast left. Next week, we are going to come back with a sort of rebinge of ourselves, and we're going to revisit our first podcast and talk about sort of how far we've come. That might be a shorter episode, but we'll see. We'll probably be making fun of ourselves on our first podcast. But then, that will wrap up Rebinge Deep Space Nine, and we will move on to a podcast just called ReBingeIT, which will cover Voyager and also Prodigy, now that Prodigy is back.
Looking forward to the second season.
And whatever other shows we decide to do. So before we go, Attiba, anything you want to pitch?
Yes. So you can find my work. I'm on Instagram at AttibaK, and you can find me on Facebook at Midnight Club Art. And also, I have just launched the Kickstarter for my new horror comic anthology that you can find on Kickstarter. It is called Phobias, Tales of Horrorgasm Volume 2. A lot of independent creators have worked very hard to bring it out, and it's very good. We're very proud of it. So please, if you have an opportunity, head on over to Kickstarter and check that out. I will make sure that Kim has the link so that she can put that in the description. And you can find me watching Star Trek somewhere.
Oh, and
Pluto.
You got to listen to the Teebs and Kid Phoenix versus podcast.
Oh, right.
Oh, and we still have to do Star Trek 5 with you guys.
Why are we doing that one?
I thought it was your idea.
It was your suggestion.
I thought it was. Okay, maybe I'm. Yeah, we'll do it. There's a lot to talk about. It's just
There is a lot to talk about. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So coming up in the future, listeners, there'll be Star Trek 5.
Oh, that'll be fun. Okay, I think we've said all that we can say. So thank you very much, Attiba. I appreciate all you've done with us on this podcast. It's been a good time.
Yes, thanks for joining us on this journey, Attiba.
Wonderful being back. I can't wait to hear Kim's take on Voyager. I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
I'm sure it will be interesting.
Watching it again on Pluto, like every time I watch Voyager, I warm to it more. So maybe...
okay. Good. I haven't watched it in, I don't know, when was it on? 25 years ago?
Yeah.
All right, so come back next week for the last episode of Rebinge Deep Space Nine. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of the entire season or of any episode, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. You can also find us on that thing that used to be Twitter and Instagram and Threads at ReBingeIT. We are also on YouTube at ReBingeIT. You can check us out on our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.
And that's it for me.